Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
Alright folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week Ben and I give you the insider's guide to property investing. Hello mate, welcome to the couch.
Good old Collingwood forever. We know how to play the game.
Very good. Hey, you didn't mention that at all, just before that he was going to do that. Not one little inkling.
Go Pies!
Wait until we push record and he's hooked into me.
Hey, intestinal fortitude.
Oh,
The strength locked down the game. The boys came to play and Freo left it in the car park.
Right. As you texted me afterwards, which I thought was reasonably gracious, that it was going to be an epic that we'll be talking to our grandkids about for years
How
and years.
ordinary was it? But when ugly, I'll take it every day of the week. I mean, and that's the game that you guys play, so we just have to be patient. So we just had to work around your flooding and your,
I knew as
everyone
soon as
down the back 50.
As soon as Cloak pulled one out of his backside to get the opening goal, I thought, we're going to play him into form.
That was Mason Cox's goal.
Yeah, it was
Well,
pretty
it's
good.
7 footer and the kicking on the side of his foot just brilliant.
All I can say is I'm glad I didn't take you up on your offer to join you to watch the game. I stayed out in the outer with the real people, mate, where the real people were getting cold. It was freezing. They weren't up with the heaters and the Chardonnay and the
We were
meat pies.
outside. We were outside in the cold. We were roughing it until each time the siren went, and we ran inside and got warmed up again, and went back out there.
It was fresh.
Got a nice photo with Trevor Hendy too. I might put that up on our Facebook page.
Yeah, put that up on the Facebook
Big
page.
fan of
That's
Trevor
good.
Hendy.
Yeah,
He's
me
a
too.
good operator. So yes, all good.
Well done. Nice heckle. I think I'm oblivious to the heckles this year.
Got a little bit of a cold at the moment, so he's a little bit precious.
Precious. Hey, to those listeners, did anyone watch us on Facebook Live last night, mate? We had a lot of fun.
We did. I learned a lot.
Mate,
I
you
saw
learned
all
a lot.
these things flying across the screen.
Mate, was that the longest you've been on Facebook in one sitting?
Yes,
Yeah.
by far.
By a country
By a country
By a
mile.
street.
I don't think I've pasted anything on Facebook other than work related.
I don't think
So I do Facebook worse than anyone.
I know. Well, mate, sometimes every now and then I get a text message back from you when I send you one. So
Text message, that's different than social media.
But the point is that if you won't even send me a text message back, chances are we're not going to get you on social media.
No,
But,
I'm too busy reading or doing something or studying something or
Heckling.
researching something or
Heckling.
watching my beloved Pies
preparing
beat.
your heckles.
Yeah, Freo.
Very good. I deserved it. Facebook Live was a real success last night, Ivers. We had loads and loads of questions. We didn't get to them all. We had a lot of fun. People actually got to see the Property Couch for the first time.
Didn't even know who we were.
Yeah.
Which one's Ben, which one's Bryce?
I don't know if I actually confused him because I was being a smart ass. But of course, you're the one with the wisdom's Ben.
No,
the one
not
without
true.
the wisdom is me.
Rubbish.
So, mate, I'm okay with that. There's no Property Investment
Don't be
Advisor of the
stupid.
Year nomination next to my name, Ivers.
No worry.
But we had a great time, and we're going to do it again. We don't know when. But
We're committed to doing
we're
it
gonna
again.
do it
That's
again.
all you need to know.
Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, "Damn, I missed that," I was at home watching the new season of Was it Offspring?
Apparently. Yep.
My wife said that to me. She goes, "Oh, how many people turned up?" I said, "Oh, it was quite a good crowd." And she goes, "That's pretty impressive, given that Offspring started again tonight." I'm thinking, great, we're competing with Offspring. But for all those listeners who did watch Offspring and didn't watch us on Facebook Live, go to Facebook, type in the Property Couch in the little search field. You'll bring up our page, and you'll be able to watch the replay of our Facebook Live.
Especially the highly professional start.
Oh. That's actually no. Don't give it away. Don't give it away.
All right, so what are we doing today, mate?
We are going to continue to answer the questions of the listeners today, but I've got a quick story for our listeners this week. There was a contract in New South Wales where during the cooling off period, the lender sent out a valuer, and because the borrower was borrowing mortgage insurance, the mortgage insurer would not insure the property because it had a high tension power line within 100 metres of the property.
So you had to crash the contract?
Had to crash the contract. So Genworth, which is one of the mortgage insurers, that's their blanket policy. And I saw the valuation myself, and it failed on environmental, or not failed, but it had a higher risk score on environmental, and I can't remember the other one. So it meant that they unpacked it a little bit further. Just there's a quote for the people who love us saying unpack.
I think Will's the one who likes us, so he says unpack.
Yeah, a lot of reviews talk about us unpacking things. So there you go. There's one for the listeners. If you found your dream home, but it's within 100 metres of a high tension power line, 80%, no problem.
Yep.
90%, you've got a problem.
Going across the contract.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into Q&A. I'll start us off.
All right.
Got one here from Glenn Daniels, and she has a question. It says, I have 2 daughters in their early 20s. What advice can you give them on the best way to enter the property market? Bryce.
Good one. Save.
Yeah.
Save a lot of money. Look, there's a very quick way that you can get into the property market and use the equity of someone else.
Yep.
There's only one sort of caveat to that. You need to get their permission first.
Yeah.
But you can go to mum and dad, and there's a number of ways that your mortgage savvy, your investment savvy mortgage broker could help you with that.
Yep.
But quite often it comes with a little bit of risk, because if it's easy to get in, lacks the financial discipline that comes from the saving and setting the goal in the first place. So there's nothing beats that sort of hard yakka of working hard, building a deposit and getting in yourself. But unfortunately, for a lot of people in their 20s, the property market is moving at a faster pace than they can save. So typically speaking, the quickest way to leverage in is using typically mum and dad's equity for the deposit and costs. You borrow the balance, or if you even go into mortgage insurance territory, you pay the mortgage insurance. But just know that if you're going to do it, you're going to be, instead of having a cash deposit and a smaller mortgage, you're essentially going to be servicing a mortgage for 106% of the purchase price, as well as the mortgage insurance if you go into mortgage insurance territory.
Yeah, so it depends on how you want to get into the market. We've talked about rent vesting before. So from that, the best way is potentially buying an investment property. So as Bryce was saying, let's use the parents' equity to get a deposit up. So it just means less time is then wasted on building a deposit. But Bryce is absolutely right. You must make sure that your children are going to be able to demonstrate that they can save money and pay off a debt. Okay, because traditionally when we're young, we're not taught these fundamentals, so get that out of the way. So then the question becomes the asset selection. So where would you get into the market? Because ultimately, like even in my journey, we didn't buy our dream home straight away. We just basically took different steps on the chessboard to get to the outcome that we were trying to get to. So we bought early. Well, I bought when I was 23. I bought the house across the road from mum and dad. But in reality, it might mean that you'd be buying interstate, so becoming that borderless investor. So it's really about looking for that best opportunity, and we're talking probably a best opportunity in that $300,000 to $400,000 price bracket. So it might take you into, sort of southeast Queensland. It might take you into a different marketplace. Because in reality, as you're also, as your children are building up their wages as they, work up their corporate ladder, that's basically the difference here. So you would be normally looking for properties that have a reasonably good yield, but don't go off track and look at studio apartments or student accommodation and think that's a good entry point, because they are very poor capital growth performers. So you're effectively chasing a yield strategy, but with some growth prospects on top of that.
Very good. I agree with what you said there, Ben. It's about making sure that your first property is not going to be your dream home.
Yeah.
So, and I think you're not going. The Gen Y, we talked about it before. There's 5.22 million Gen Ys in this country, and they often want the dream home straight up. No, they need to see it as a stepping stone to second or third property. So my advice would be to compromise on some practicalities, maybe consider a one-bedroom apartment closer into the city where it's going to have some growth performance, and don't see it as your dream home straight away. Yeah,
or the alternative option, as we've been doing for some of our clients, is maybe buying a townhouse in a secondary city that will also potentially have that higher yield, but a bit of a growth story in terms it's been soft for a little period of time. Ivis has just handed me a piece of paper. It says episode 54, cost of entering into the property investment market. So thanks, Ivis. So that's episode 54. If you're new to the podcast, remember, I think it's always good to start from the first episode, because we're taking you on a bit of a journey.
So there's 70 episodes, Ben.
70?
Roughly half an hour each on average. So there's 35 hours of frameworks, of principles, of nuggets that people can get if they start from the beginning. So it's kind of, it's an evolution.
And here's a tip, listen to us in 1.5 times. So if you're on iTunes, make sure, because you can comprehend pretty quickly. And if you're bored about our sports commentary or whatever, then that's terrific. Times us 2 at that point, and then get into the content that you want to listen to. So that's how I get through so many podcasts, is I listen at times 2 or at 1.5 times until I get to an area of interest for me, and then I'll slow it down. And if I really like what's being said, I might even revisit that. Just a little tip in terms of how to maximise your time, because we're all time poor.
Very good productivity hack, Ben, but I do reckon that people should do 1.5 times on everyone else's podcast and 1 time on ours.
No, don't listen. Just
and you do it every time? Because I do 1.5
time.
times as well.
Every time.
But at the end of a busy day, when you've got lots going through your mind, mate, it can race the anxiety up when you're at 1.5. I have to sometimes just bring it back down to 1 time. So.
Well, when I do listen, there's on a rare occasion that I listen at 1 time, I actually think that's, they're slow. When I finally get to listen to them talk, I'm like, are they a bit right? Are they a bit slow? No. So anyway, 1.5 times.
I listen to a lot of audio books. So audible.com, they have a speed at 1.25.
Ooh,
so iTunes doesn't have 1.25. It only has 1 and 1.5.
Are you listening, iTunes? 1.25.
1.25, because it's just sometimes you want it just a bit faster, but not sounding like it's the chipmunks, So very good
good.
Productivity tip there.
Beautiful.
Another productivity hack. Do you know when you on your iPhone?
Yeah.
When you get if you use visual voicemail.
What's that?
You don't know what visual voicemail is? You know when you check your voicemail.
Oh yeah.
And it's instead of ringing dial 101 and collect your messages, you go here.
Yeah.
At the end, you can go to the little eye at the end and see that little box with the arrow.
Yeah.
You can send it to someone else. So the other day, someone rang me about the house and said, I need to organise a time. I've just hit that little share button, text it to my wife. She can hear the message and deal with it. So I've just cut down some time. So, mate, if you're into productivity hacks, mate, I'm into productivity hacks as well.
Oh, gee,
so there's one.
There's a good one.
That might save you a minute a day.
Well, we're here to share, and
we've
had other people reach out to us and say more on professional development stuff. So it's all part of the journey we're going on. Life is short.
Yeah. Very good. Michael D. Laurentiis, Facebook message. Hey guys, just want to say I'm loving the podcast. Found it about a week ago. I've listened to hours of content in a short amount of time. As we said, there's 35 hours of content. Unless you do it at 1.5 times, there's probably about 20 hours of content.
Wrap it up. 2 times. Get through it.
Such a great resource. Has been good to hear that a lot of my ideas and research is being validated in what you're saying, but has also given me some other things to think about.
Oh.
I'm about to buy my first property in partnership with my cousin. I'm making an offer today on a great find that's too good to pass up. 15 kilometres northwest of the Melbourne CBD, 150 k's under median price in the area. Quick sale needed as the vendor needs finance ASAP. Just wondering, what would be a bad figure in terms of rental yield and annual growth? And then I guess what would be the better figures to see? Thanks again for such a great learning tool. So the growth yield combination, typically...
How far out were we?
15 kilometres northwest of the Melbourne CBD.
Okay, so not too far out.
Yeah.
And 150,000
under median price in the area. So there's not enough to make a full judgment here because we don't know if it's a house or a townhouse or whatever.
But sounding good. Sounds like that is a sweet spot in the Melbourne market now because of the actual strong growth that we've seen enjoyed in the property market around Melbourne. So from that point of view, I actually like it. There's a couple of things in there that sort of says to me, you know what? I've got one red flag, which links into, I might just combine 2 questions if I can here, bro.
Go for it.
So I've got Stevie Dillon. He says, buying a home. I'm interested in the issue associated with buying property with another person. So that's what he was talking about before. For example, I currently own 2 houses bought years ago with my brother as investments. And I now want to buy another within to live in. As I can't get a loan with just my salary, and I want to use the equity in the houses in lieu of a deposit.
Yeah.
So he's got his properties with his brother, he's got nice equity in them, but his own income can't service the new loan. Okay. This will then restrict my brother's borrowing capacity to buy a property to live in if he wants to do so in a year or so's time. So we're in a bit of a, in brackets, friendly stalemate with what to do about this. Buy another or not. This is the only downside in going into a partnership on buying a property. Now, we talk about this as it's called joint and several liability. So from a lending perspective, you go into partnership. So Bryce and I buy a $500,000 home and we borrow 100%. So it's basically a $500,000 loan. So technically you'd think that, 50% each, we've got 50% ownership, and we would have $250,000 loans that we have to whittle away ourselves. Well, the bank doesn't see it like that. What the bank sees it is there's joint and several liability here. So they're basically saying, well, if your friendship breaks down, or if your circumstances change and one of you decides, no, I want out, and the other one doesn't, and then one stops paying the mortgage, the other one's on the hook to basically, so there's that joint liability. So you can't, get out of your obligation. What it also then means is when you're going to borrow money for your own situation, the bank wants this is where it gets really, really negative in terms of the, in Stevie's case, is an example. So we've got this property, Bryce and I want to go and buy another property. So the way in which most lenders will assess this is they will say, oh, Ben, you have a $500,000 debt, not a $250,000 debt, but it gets even better. They'll only assess 50% of the rental income.
Yeah.
So they'll only give you 50% of the rental income, the gross rental income that is.
And the value.
Well, no, the value, yes, they'll give you a bit of the value, but in reality, it's more around your servicing will smash you. So this is a classic case of where we've got equity, but we can't service that. So that is a real challenge, and that does slow down the progress of people building out property portfolios. So, remember we talk about the A, B, C, D. This is a classic case of borrowing power. So what's our mate?
Michael.
Michael's done a great job in terms of done his research. His asset selection sounds pretty good. He's probably done his own cash flows to say, I can afford this now, but his borrowing power seems like we can get it now. But ultimately, this could be a limiting factor in terms of moving forward. So, what do you do there? So when anyone comes into our business, we'll sit down and talk to them about what their plans are. And we would always say you need to have a binding agreement around the exit strategy. So everyone goes into this with their eyes wide open, but if something goes wrong, what is the exit strategy? And I always say to people, as Ivis has a little coughing attack, I always say to people, this is what you need to do. You need, inside the agreement, it needs to say this, that inside a minimum of 5 years, if one of you get out of the agreement, the other person can take over the ownership, but you only get out the deposit that you made. In other words, you lose your deposit. So you get nothing out of exiting out in the first 5 years.
Otherwise, you lose everything but
lose
your
everything.
deposit.
Well, even that. I even say take the deposit away. So I stuff that up. But what I'm basically saying is whoever's put money in the first 5 years, if one wants out, then the other party just takes it over.
Yeah, good
so
point.
they have first right of refusal to take it over, and they lose everything. Yeah. So that really then says, well, okay, I'm on the hook here that I must stay in this deal for at least 5 years. Because what normally happens if it's brothers or if it's mates, cousins in this case, it's one of them meets Mrs. Right, and then they're off. She wants to get married, and they want to start organising their life, and he's got all this money sitting in this property, and he can't move on. He's like, oh, we've got to sell it, bro. We've got to sell it. And the reality is that's not what we want to see, because you won't make any money. So it's been a waste of time.
Man, I think it's a good filtering exercise what you described, because I always think partnerships often don't work because everyone has a big love in at the beginning. It's not until you're trying to get out that they find it that they don't work. But the joint severable liability is not too dissimilar to a credit card facility where you've got a $20,000 credit card, you pay it off every month, and when you're applying for a loan, the bank uses the $20,000 limit as an assessment criteria, but you're trying, but I never spend that much, it's just in emergencies, and the bank takes the same view that you run it up. So partnerships, so that you're right, Ben, there's a couple of things in both of those. The first property I bought was in partnership with someone who was not bloodline to me, so I know this very, very well. Joint and several liability did trip me up, and the partnership, when we first went in, everything was great, high fives, pats on the backs, aren't we great, sharing beers. But then I've got to say that relationship didn't end well with that. So there's a few things to consider. But if it means you can get on the ladder, great. But I think what you just said is beautiful. Pressure test for 5 years, have that discussion first, and if you feel queasy or uneasy, maybe then it's probably not meant to be.
So, and I'll just wrap that one up by saying, I've given you the dark side. The bright side is with an investment-savvy mortgage broker, there are potentially some lenders who look past that joint and several liability, but it's only in certain circumstances. So a great mortgage broker will be able to tell you which are the lenders who do that and what options are associated with those. So there are a couple that have recognised this as an opportunity to lend money and potentially set up a structure that does allow for only single liability as opposed to joint liability. So, start fleshing that out. Start having that conversation with your investment savvy mortgage broker.
Well, so the last bit here, Benny, goes, what would be a bad figure in terms of rental yield and annual growth combination? To be fair to say, we're trying for that 10 to 11% combination. So if you're getting 4% correct. Growth, 7% yield, 7% growth, 4% yield.
Yes.
If you want to be a bit more conservative, 6 and 4, 4 and 6, 5 and 5.
I think they're really great ones. In terms of, for Stevie, to finish off Stevie Dillon's question here, so what should we do? Well, this is a conundrum. I mean, ultimately, you may have to take one step back to move forward in terms of buying your own place, or consider rent vesting again. So continue to keep going on this journey. So if your brother's getting serious in a relationship, at some point I suspect you're going to have to unwind that. Now, if you've created equity, that might mean that you can cash some of that out. If one of them was a principal place of residence at some point, that's obviously a benefit in terms of the tax liability that might materialise. So, it's a case-by-case basis. But unfortunately, based on NCC policy, so National Consumer Credit Code, what we're talking about here is no one can give a servicing guarantee, which means that I can't use anyone else's income as a guarantee to help me move forward. We talked in that earlier case study where the young, the two people in their 20s, we can do a security guarantee. Parents, friends, brothers can give a security guarantee, but they can't give a servicing guarantee. And the reason for that is because brokers and lenders must comply to the laws, and the laws are that, you must be able to service the loan. In other words, it's a responsible lending obligation under the law. So if people have servicing guarantees, then they'll get past that, and basically ASIC won't be able to prosecute anyone. So that's why they took servicing guarantees out.
There's a nugget of gold there for your listeners. Very, very good, Ben. Samuel Powell, dear Bryce and Ben, aka the Property Couch. I'm 27-year-old single male living in Burleigh Heads on the Gold Coast. Oh, how good is that?
All right. Life's all right.
And looking to enter the property market. I have $40,000 in cash and currently on a base wage of $60,000 with on-target earnings of $90,000. Question: I'm very open to the idea of rent vesting. However, I'm torn between rent vesting or purchasing a PPR, principal place of residence, of which I would live in for 12 months and then rent out for 6 years, thus avoiding capital gains tax, plus rent out the other rooms whilst living in the property. I would love to hear both your thoughts on this one, given the current market conditions and also the Gold Coast Suns' performance this year. Background: I like where I live and I'm not emotional when it comes to property, as my interest is in creating a solid passive income into the future whilst maintaining my lifestyle. I enjoy the podcast and your approach to property. I understand that you've covered a large section of this question within the rent vesting podcast. However, I do not live in Sydney or Melbourne, and housing flat affordability where I wish to live is less of an issue. I thank you in advance and look forward to your response. Good question.
All right, it is a great question. Thanks for that, Samuel.
Well, I think the point that he's talking about, whether you would buy in the market, if you're living on the Gold Coast, there's two parts of it. Gold Coast has probably got some really good potential at the minute, but for the last 10 years, it's been on life support and flatline. So buying a principal place of residence in that market during those conditions wouldn't have been the best thing for him, where rent vesting would have been best. He could stay on Burleigh Heads, get nice and close to the beach, get up with his surfboard under his arm every morning.
Sounds good. Let me at it.
Surf the point, go for breakfast on... Oh, now I'm going to
Have you lived on the Gold Coast?
I have lived on the Gold Coast. A bit further down near Palm Beach. So... the point is that I think his strategic thinking is very smart, because he could have been rent vesting on the Gold Coast and buying a 2-bedroom apartment in Sydney or Melbourne or probably, not right now in Brisbane, but Brisbane, where he could have got better performance while still living the main lifestyle. So I think it's a really smart question that he's asking, and probably a really relevant one as to whether you would buy on the Gold Coast versus buying in another stronger metropolis.
Correct. And I think the reason why 40,000 deposit.
Did you put your teeth back in?
40,000 deposit is that limitation, because obviously if we're talking about 90% LVRs or even 95% LVRs, it's not a big deposit to get us over the line. So there's a couple of things that jumped out at me in terms of, the first thing says, principal place of residence which I'll live in for the next 12 months and then rent out. Now, if that's your primary reason to buy your principal place of residence, that's tax avoidance. So don't be advocating that that's exactly the reason why you're doing it. You're buying a home because you want to live in there. If your circumstances change and you move out, that's when it becomes possible to have that 6-year rule. Now, and just for everyone's benefit, there's no set limit. The ATO hasn't released a set limit to say you must live in it for 12 months. Like if your circumstances change and your work, so I'll give you an example. I buy a house in Beenleigh, okay, but I'm working down at Burleigh Heads as an example, and I just find that time to get to work is just too difficult for me. I thought I could do it, so I go and buy my principal home and I live in there, and then it just becomes too difficult. So I decide to maximise my working effort and so forth. I'm going to live close to where I work, so I'm going to go and rent down there and keep my Beenleigh property and turn it into a rental property. That is an honest assessment of the situation, and naturally that would then, so you could have lived in it for say a month and a half, 2 months, 3 months, and you had all your utilities, everything going there, and then the circumstances change, you put it up for lease. Okay, that would be a legitimate reason. So there's no set time in terms of what that looks like. The ATO haven't declared that, from what I understand. Check with your accountant. Okay, this is not binding advice. Check with your accountant. That's the
reasonable person test, because a reasonable person would say that's fair enough. But if you did it and you moved to another place that's 4 streets away, wouldn't pass the reasonable person test.
Or we've had people come into our business and talk about that they're in Point Cook and they rented each other's house next door.
Oh, dodgy. Got to at least be another suburb.
They came in and said, "Oh yeah, this is what we're doing," And I said, "So what if the ATO says, well, wait a minute, you're renting next door and you own a place the door after, and they're doing big data tests. They're going to work this out. And why is that? Oh, the configuration of that house is better suited to my family versus the other." Good luck with that argument.
Yeah. Because they're both 4-bedroom. Yeah, it's like same block size.
4-bedroom, 2-bathroom next door to each other. Definitely different builders. Yeah. But that's the argument they're going to have to put forward, and whether it washes with a tax commissioner, I'll see you in court, it's going to cost them more to fight their point than the tax they're saving. So,
because I've often thought that's actually not a bad strategy, because if you find, with my sister, I buy her dream house, she buys my dream house, we rent it off each other, but it doesn't. as long as we both don't want to live in the same
exactly,
suburb.
And it's not a strategy. If we're doing it for tax advantages, it's illegal. Everyone, I want to get that message out there. So the reality is, if you are going to, so let's pack this out a little bit more for Samuel. If you do decide to buy and live and then rent it out over time, that has a very good uplift in regards to the capital growth that you will enjoy, so long as the property has capital growth. Now, the timing of the Gold Coast is not a bad time to look at the Gold Coast. So you've got to remember that it's not a market that consistently delivers spectacular capital growth, but there are times that you can get into this market which will deliver short-term uplift. And that short-term uplift might be a 5 or a 6-year boom. And then, I don't have a problem with you looking at the Gold Coast market now, looking at a townhouse around that price point, and make sure it's on its own title, okay? And make sure it's a minimum of 3 bedrooms, all right? Ideally 3 bedrooms, 2 bath. Have a look at that. You want to be, basically beachside if you can, or close to the water as much as possible, because they're the lifestyle drivers. You want to be within walking distance of some cafes and some type of amenity. They're going to be really important on the Gold Coast. So focus on that, move into it, and financially that is a good move. If you then decide to then become a rent investor, because what we're talking about here is trying to get that equity, that capital growth over a short period of time, so you can go again, Samuel. That's the big trick here. In terms of the 6-year rule, we've talked about this before. You don't have to sell it, just for everyone listening. You do not have to sell it after 6 years, but you must get a valuation. Yeah. Okay, get a valuation to have a look at your circumstances at that point. Now, you might have had a valuation 2 or 3 years after you bought it because it's grown in value and you've got another deposit to go again. That's how you create wealth in property.
Very good, very good. All right, folks. We excuse me, with the...
We're dying here in Melbourne's weather.
We are. If you're listening at the moment, walking along the beach in the Sunshine Coast or something like that, we envy you.
Yeah, we do.
We envy
well,
you.
Darwin 33
Or if
today.
you're
I want to be in Darwin.
Yeah, Darwin's 31 and storms every day. Ben, we're going to give you a bit of time. We've run out of time here. So we're going to election on Saturday.
Those questions for next time.
Yep. Excuse me. So election on Saturday, and of course I want to know if you've got any New Year's Eve parties planned tonight.
New Year's Eve parties. It's a New Year's.
Happy New Year tomorrow, 1st of July.
Oh, yep. Sorry, good point. Financial year and a financial year. See, this is how much I'm focused on this podcast. I just can't see anything else. I just got my blinkers on. All right, let's talk negative gearing. All right. So, a couple of big revelations that occurred over the course of the last 48 hours, and that was that we did see another questionable position on Labor's black hole. In regards to the revenue that they said that they were going to generate. So they've gone to the market with all of these election promises. They're 100 promises, and it's all more about spending. Now, the biggest message I say here as someone who studies the economy well and has a high interest in it, is that you do not create economic prosperity through spending or raising taxes. You do not create economic prosperity by spending more and raising taxes. That's not how you get an economy thriving for the longer term. So that said, remember, that 100 billion in promises, I've told you this ages ago, and it's now sort of coming to roost. And that was that they're using the smoke excise and this negative gearing, claiming it's going to save $32 billion. It simply will not save that $32 billion. Yet if they deliver on all of their election promises and spend all that money, we're going to have a bigger deficit. And so obviously from that point of view, this is why I'm advocating. I have no problem with the Labor Party. In fact, I've voted Labor more times than I've voted Liberal. They're saying something about me, full disclosure. So it's important to understand that I just don't like this particular policy. So we are apolitical. We're not going to sit here and badger the political parties, but what we do want to see is good economic management, and this is obviously fundamental in regards to what we're talking about with this negative gearing policy. So the question then was that what's happened is they've gone and had it assessed through the parliamentary budget. They've released their figures, and Liberal have done the same thing, just delaying it by 1 year, and they've come up with a big conclusion that the results in terms of their confidence around the numbers is of a very low level, which basically means that they don't really like the numbers and the projections that they've got in the models, and they don't think that those models will deliver those savings that have been claimed by Labor. So, and I totally agree. And I agree based on the principle, and there's a study out of Harvard University that talks about capital gains provisions. In other words, if you disincentivize people to sell because there's such a high tax burden in selling, they just won't sell. And we've advocated from day one that negative gearing is not an investment strategy. Negative gearing is a moment in time. That loss is only recorded at that moment in time. Over the journey of owning that investment property, you will enjoy the value of that property growing. You will enjoy the rents creeping up. You will enjoy paying off the debt, and you'll see that property turn into a positive asset producing property, which effectively means passive income for life. So, yep,
taxable passive income for life.
Correct. Yeah, we have to pay tax on that income. In the earlier stages, as we're setting up our business, we get to claim the tax, okay, as an incentive. But we also create jobs. We also are, helping with the supply story. So, I've said it all along. It's a big decision to make. Get the facts right. I'm not the only one saying this. You've got the Property Council of Australia, you've got the Urban Development Institute of Australia, you've got the Masters Builders Association, you've got the Housing Industry Association, you've got the Realtors saying that. And you might think that, well, wait a minute, that's everyone in the industry. Yeah, but these are experts in terms of what they do, and they think it's poor policy too. And Labor's policy encourages negative gearing on new development. Now, by encouraging it on new development, you would think that the likes of the Urban Development Institute and all builders and developers, masters builders, they'd be thinking this is a boon. They'd be thinking, absolutely, we're going to get behind this policy. All of them have said it's a stupid idea because you basically destroy the secondary market. and you'll have properties like cars, and so it won't just affect investors, it'll affect everyday owner-occupiers as well. I'm sure I'm speaking to the converted, but if you can get this message out on the final hours before the election, we won't see any changes to negative gearing, and that would be a good thing for the economy. It'll be a good thing for jobs and for mum and dads at home trying to make a contribution to their household to build their wealth so they don't have to rely on government pensions, which won't be there because of the cost burden of providing health services into the future. You just cannot rely on a pension being in play. So that's why we're taking charge of our own circumstances, and we're going to make sure that if it is our wealth outcome that we're looking for our family, we can deliver it ourselves.
Folks, you couldn't see that, but Ben was a part-time Italian there. Lots of hand movement. Very, very passionate about that. You can tell it from his voice. He's
My
been saying
hands are
this
how
job
I think.
since episode 51. Ben has been talking about this very, very passionately.
We called it out then, and it's come to roost. You know, it's really nice to starting to see. We saw modelling from SQM research telling us that property prices are going to fall by as much as 15%. This was stuff that we were saying.
And that's from Louis Christopher, who's a very strong proponent in change.
He wants change to negative gearing. So we said it back, but just as soon as Labor announced their policy, and we did some reading up on it, it is not good policy, and let's hope it doesn't come to fruition.
Doesn't come to fruition. Very, very good. All right, there you go, folks. Little bit of, first of all, thanks to everyone who's written in and given us some great questions. We love doing Q&A, so we'd love you to keep sending them through. Our downloads are now just a touch around 400,000, which is really enormous for us in 70 episodes. And of course, as I say every week, join the conversation. Whether you're a Facebook user, you can go and check out last night's Facebook Live replay on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Go and check that out. And as I say, if you like our podcast and you're getting some benefit out of the podcast, if you could just tell someone about it, that'd be great. And of course, the reviews on iTunes and through Android Store, those things just mean the little algorithm works so that we get driven up the list, Ben, so more people can find us.
And the book's become a bestseller.
The book has become a bestseller.
Bestseller.
Thank you for that.
So if you haven't got the book, check it out on the website as well.
propertycouch.com.au/book. All right, mate, where are we signing off this week?
Vietnamese.
Vietnamese. We want tonality too, please.
Oh, you want tonality? Oh, tonality.
Okay.
No, that's sort of gone a bit Indian then, didn't it?
Yeah, a little bit Indian.
No, Iris has given me the cut the neck, no tonality.
All right.
Okay, so there's 3, but I'll pick on the bottom one here. Tam bet. Well, maybe that's what that hyphen thing above the E is. You say the E like that, yeah. Tam bet.
For all the Vietnamese listeners, let us know as we ask every week.
For all of those people in Swan Street, Richmond, ring me up, let me know. That's the little Vietnamese community, a beautiful part of Melbourne, some of the best feed you will get in this city. So to them and to everyone else, until next week, Tam bet.
All right, folks. See you next week.